There is a kind of silence that does not arise from the absence of sound, but from the absence of understanding. A silence that descends upon those who think too deeply, feel too profoundly, and see too clearly in a world too distracted to care. These are the thinkers, the philosophers, the scientists, the visionaries, whose inner world often became too vast, too intricate, too raw for society to hold. They ask questions most are too frightened to ask. They live at the edges of certainty, where comfort evaporates and truth begins. And for this, they are often alone. Why is it that those who seek truth with relentless devotion often find themselves wandering through life in solitude? Why do minds that push the boundaries of human understanding also suffer the weight of alienation? And what can we learn from the loneliness of the world's greatest thinkers? This is not a story of pity. It is not a lament. It is a journey. Through time, through minds, through philosophies, into the beating heart of human introspection, we will explore the quiet agony of isolation and the fierce light that burns in its shadows. Isolation is not always a curse. Sometimes it is the inevitable cost of seeing too much. To understand this, we must begin with the paradox of thought and belonging. Human beings are by nature social creatures. We thrive on connection. We seek validation, comfort, and mutual understanding. Yet the deeper a person thinks, the further they often drift from the center of collective consensus. Ideas that do not fit easily into the molds of conventional thinking are met with resistance, or worse, indifference. The result? A dissonance between inner truth and outer belonging. This paradox is not merely personal, it is structural. Society, as a system, resists change. It rewards conformity, routine, and consensus. Deep thinkers, by contrast, are disruptors. Their very existence challenges assumptions, norms, and traditions. They are not dangerous by intent, but by clarity. And clarity, in a world built on illusion, is often unbearable. Let us begin with Socrates, the gadfly of Athens. Here was a man who refused to claim wisdom, yet spent his life asking the most penetrating questions. He wandered the agora of Athens, questioning politicians, poets, and craftsmen, exposing their ignorance not to humiliate them, but to awaken them. And for this, he was executed. Socrates lived in a time when Athens was struggling with identity and power. His method, dialectical reasoning, was radical. He did not offer easy answers. He forced others to confront the uncertainty of their own beliefs. And this made people uncomfortable, dangerous. When he was sentenced to death, Socrates refused to flee. He drank the hemlock willingly, declaring that the unexamined life is not worth living. In this final act, we see both the tragedy and triumph of the deep thinker. Tragedy because he was condemned by the very society he sought to enlighten. Triumph because he remained true to his conscience to the end. Socrates' story reminds us the price of radical honesty is often isolation. Now we turn to Friedrich Nietzsche, a man who danced on the edge of the abyss. Nietzsche saw through the illusions of his time. He diagnosed the death of God not as a celebration, but a crisis. He recognized that the collapse of metaphysical certainties would leave modern man adrift, without anchor or compass. He envisioned the rise of nihilism long before it became a cultural reality. And yet, Nietzsche's insight was not celebrated. It was feared, misinterpreted, and ignored. His ideas were too volatile, too piercing, too naked. Nietzsche lived in near total solitude. His health was poor, his relationships were fragile, and in 1889, he succumbed to madness on the streets of Turin. Some say it was a physical ailment. Others suggest it was the crushing weight of his own vision, too expansive for the mind to hold. He once wrote, "He who fights with monsters should be careful, lest he thereby become a monster." And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. In those words is the echo of every thinker who has stared too long into the soul of humanity, only to find their own reflection breaking apart. To think deeply is to live with contradictions. Psychologists have long observed that highly introspective individuals are more prone to anxiety, depression, and existential distress. It is not because they are weaker, but because they are more attuned, more sensitive to nuance, more disturbed by hypocrisy, more conscious of mortality. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the process by which one becomes truly oneself. It is not a comfortable journey. It is a descent into the unconscious, a confrontation with the shadow, a reconciliation of inner opposites. Those who walk this path do so alone, not because they wish to, but because few others are willing. The deep thinker is often caught between two impossible needs: the need to understand and the need to belong. The deeper the understanding, the harder the belonging becomes. Because how does one explain the chaos of the cosmos at a dinner party? How does one articulate metaphysical despair in casual conversation? It is not arrogance that isolates the thinker. It is the inability to shrink their inner world to the size of ordinary talk. If Socrates represents the defiant martyr and Nietzsche the prophetic madman, then Arthur Schopenhauer is the philosophical pessimist, deeply aware of the pain embedded in existence itself. Schopenhauer believed that suffering is not an exception but the rule. According to him, the will, an irrational, blind force that drives all life, binds every living being to an endless cycle of desire, frustration, and pain. We suffer because we want, and even when we get what we want, we only want more. The cycle never ends. This worldview, though bleak, wasn't born out of despair for its own sake. It was born from clarity. Schopenhauer saw existence for what it was, stripped of illusions, and like many thinkers before and after him, this led to a life marked by isolation. He lived much of his life alone, never married, and had few close relationships. His views were ignored during his early years, overshadowed by the more optimistic idealism of Hegel. Schopenhauer was contemptuous of the academic establishment, often delivering lectures to empty rooms. But beneath the gloom of his philosophy lies a strange kind of liberation. For Schopenhauer, meaning could still be found, not in chasing illusions, but in beauty, art, and asceticism. Music, in particular, offered a glimpse into a world beyond suffering. In transcending desire, we transcend pain. In this, Schopenhauer joins the chorus of lonely geniuses who, by diving deep into despair, surface with a kind of hard-won serenity. Let us turn now to science, to a man who lit up the world but lived in darkness. Nikola Tesla was a visionary beyond his time. His inventions laid the groundwork for modern electricity, wireless communication, and countless other technologies. And yet Tesla died penniless and alone in a New York hotel room, feeding pigeons as his only companions. Tesla's isolation was not just social, it was psychological. He thought in visions. He claimed to see detailed engineering diagrams in his mind, rotating them in 3 dimensions before ever sketching a line on paper. This gift, or burden, separated him from nearly everyone around him. He was not driven by profit, but by possibility. While contemporaries like Edison commercialized their inventions, Tesla gave his away freely, believing knowledge should serve humanity. The world, predictably, did not reward him for this idealism. But Tesla's solitude was more than the result of being unappreciated. It was the byproduct of a mind that operated at a frequency few others could tune into. He once said, "The mind is sharper and keener in seclusion and uninterrupted solitude. No big laboratory is needed in which to think." Yet this solitude came with a cost. In his later years, Tesla became reclusive, eccentric, haunted by dreams of death rays and cosmic forces. Was this madness, or simply a genius pushed too far from the human world? Perhaps it is both. The common thread that runs through these lives, Socrates, Schopenhauer, Tesla, is that society does not embrace deep thinkers easily. Why? Because radical thought disrupts comfort. It reveals unpleasant truths. It refuses to flatter the status quo. In every era, those who push the boundaries of knowledge and perception are met not with open arms, but with suspicion, hostility, or silence. Galileo was placed under house arrest for confirming that the Earth orbits the Sun. Hypatia, one of the earliest female mathematicians and philosophers, was brutally murdered by a mob in Alexandria. Giordano Bruno was burned alive for proposing an infinite universe. These are not isolated events. They are symptoms of a deeper pattern. Society resists transformation. The revolutionary is not feared because they are wrong, but because they might be right. And rightness, in the early stages, often appears as madness. Ironically, the very isolation that deep thinkers suffer may also be their source of strength. Solitude strips away distraction. It creates space for reflection, for slow thought, for uncomfortable honesty. Virginia Woolf famously argued for a room of one's own as a necessity for creative work. Jung withdrew to his tower in Bollingen. Thoreau retreated to Walden Pond. Isolation, in its purest form, is not emptiness. It is incubation. Within silence, thoughts are allowed to grow wild and strange. Without the noise of conformity, the the soul can hear its own voice, and that voice is often what leads to breakthroughs in science, philosophy, and art. But make no mistake, this is a double-edged sword. Prolonged isolation without community can become a prison. The mind turns inward, but if there is no return to the world, it risks becoming unmoored. That is why many thinkers have walked the line between genius and madness, because the very condition that grants them insight also threatens to undo them. To understand more is often to suffer more. This is not a romantic notion, it is a psychological reality. The deeper one sees into the structure of the world, the suffering, the hypocrisy, the impermanence, the harder it becomes to participate naively in it. The bliss of ignorance is denied, and yet this burden is not without beauty. There is something sublime in facing the full weight of existence and refusing to look away. It is an act of courage, of defiance, of profound humanity. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote that suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. Deep thinkers are often those who, in their suffering, seek that meaning, not only for themselves, but for others. Carl Jung was not merely a psychologist, he was a cartographer of the soul. Where Freud stopped at neuroses, Jung ventured deeper into dreams, archetypes, myths, and the collective unconscious. He dared to suggest that within us live not only repressed memories, but the entire symbolic inheritance of humanity. But to make this discovery, Jung had to walk alone. His break from Freud wasn't just professional, it was existential. Freud was his mentor, the father figure of psychoanalysis. Yet Jung could not remain in Freud's intellectual shadow. He felt something deeper stirring, something ancient and vast. So he departed. What followed was a psychological crisis that would terrify most. Jung called it a confrontation with the unconscious. He withdrew from the world, built a stone tower in Bollingen, and entered into a daily dialogue with his own psyche. He saw visions, spoke with dream figures, painted mandalas, and recorded it all in what would become the Red Book. To the world, Jung had gone mad, and in a sense he had, but it was a sacred madness, a deliberate descent into the depths to retrieve meaning. Jung's journey reminds us that sometimes isolation is not exile, it is initiation. Those who descend alone may return with treasures no one else can see. Across cultures and ages, we find recurring myths of the isolated wise one, the prophet, the hermit, the mad scientist, the tortured artist. This is no accident. Jung called these recurring symbols archetypes, universal patterns that live in the collective psyche. The isolated genius is one such archetype. He or she sees what others cannot. They speak truths the world isn't ready for, and as a result they are exiled, mocked, or destroyed. Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humans, was punished for his gift. Cassandra, who could foresee the future, was cursed never to be believed. Christ, who preached a radical new vision of love, was crucified. These stories endure not only because of their religious or literary power, but because they echo the real psychological structure of human society. We fear what we don't understand, and we often fear those who understand too much. The genius is rarely welcomed in their time. Their ideas are too disruptive, their questions too uncomfortable. Only in retrospect do we sanctify them after their danger has passed. Today, the problem is no longer exile, it's dilution. We live in an age of hyperconnectivity, yet true connection feels rare. Information is abundant, but wisdom is scarce. Algorithms curate our preferences, and attention is shattered into fragments. In this context, the deep thinker is not burned or imprisoned, they are ignored. Modernity has little patience for depth. It rewards speed, visibility, and simplicity, everything the contemplative mind resists. In such a world, solitude becomes harder to find and more necessary than ever. Thinkers today face a paradox. They have the tools to reach millions, yet often find themselves speaking into a void. Thoughtful content is buried beneath a flood of noise. Algorithms favor sensationalism over substance. This isn't just inconvenient, it's dangerous. When society devalues introspection, it loses its ability to self-correct. When it shuns deep thought, it invites shallow chaos. To think deeply is to suffer deeply, but also to see more clearly. Jung believed that wholeness could only be found by integrating the shadow, the parts of ourselves we risk or deny, and so it is with society. The deep thinker holds up a mirror, revealing what culture hides, its contradictions, its blind spots, its fears. But this mirror is heavy to carry. The burden of insight can lead to depression, anxiety, alienation. Many deep thinkers experience an acute sensitivity to the suffering of others. They feel not just their own pain, but the pain of the collective. This is not weakness, it is a form of spiritual empathy. But without support, it can become overwhelming. The thinker who sees too much may withdraw, not out of contempt, but out of exhaustion. Yet there is a transformation possible within this suffering. Jung taught that the path of individuation, the journey toward becoming one's true self, requires solitude, not the loneliness of exile, but the aloneness of awakening. To individuate is to become whole. It is to reconcile opposites within, reason and emotion, light and shadow, intellect and instinct. This journey is not outward but inward, and it often demands withdrawal from the collective. But in this solitude lies power. True solitude is not emptiness, it is space to listen, to integrate, to create. Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote, "The point is to live everything. Live the questions now." The deep thinker lives not for answers, but for the richness of the question. And in doing so, they become a bridge between the seen and unseen, the conscious and unconscious, the individual and the universal. True thinkers do not simply suffer in isolation. They transform that suffering into something greater. Like alchemists of the soul, they transmute alienation into insight, pain into poetry, exile into expression. Their loneliness becomes their crucible. Take Friedrich Nietzsche. He once wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." His life was a testament to this chaos. His ideas, radical, poetic, maddening, emerged not from social consensus, but from deep inner solitude. And although he died largely misunderstood and mentally broken, his influence only grew with time. The seeds he planted bloomed decades later in philosophy, literature, and psychology. Solitude, when embraced rather than feared, can clarify one's voice. It cuts through the noise. It creates the conditions for original thought. While the crowd echoes and repeats, the solitary mind listens inward. And there, in the silence, truth speaks. Why does every age seem to need its outsider? Because the outsider plays a sacred role. They are society's mirror and conscience. They question the unquestioned. They pull at the seams of the dominant narrative, often irritating but necessary. Socrates called himself a gadfly, provoking the sleepy horse of Athenian society to wake up. He did not offer comforting illusions. He asked unsettling questions, and for that he was sentenced to death. Yet today, we call him the father of Western philosophy. In every society, there are forces of order and forces of chaos. The outsider dwells at the border between the two. They are liminal beings, not quite inside, not entirely outside, and because of that, they can see both realms. They are not enemies of society. They are its unacknowledged architects. They are the future speaking through the present. History is full of thinkers who were reviled in life and revered in death. Galileo was condemned by the church for suggesting the earth revolved around the sun. Vincent van Gogh sold only one painting in his lifetime. Emily Dickinson lived most of her life in seclusion, her genius recognized only after her death. Nikola Tesla died poor and forgotten, yet today his name powers a global revolution. This pattern is tragic, but telling. The world often resists what it most needs, until it's too late. Deep thinkers are not prophets of destruction. They are early signals of transformation. But transformation is painful, and most people resist it. When the ideas of a misunderstood thinker finally take root, it's not because society has grown more intelligent, but because reality has finally caught up to vision. For the modern deep thinker, isolation may not take the form of exile, but rather a quiet disconnection, a sense of being out of sync with the prevailing mood. Yet this disconnection can become sacred. Jung built his stone tower in Bollingen not as a retreat from the world, but as a return to essence. It was where he wrote, sculpted, dreamed. His mind required a space untouched by culture's noise. In our own way, we must each find our Bollingen, a place, a ritual, a practice that recenters us. Meditation, long walks, reading by candlelight, journaling in silence. These are not luxuries, they are lifelines. In the absence of external understanding, we build internal sanctuaries. The world may not always listen, but the soul does. What if being misunderstood is not a curse, but a signal? It means you are thinking differently, seeing from a new angle. operating on a frequency others haven't tuned into yet. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "To be great is to be misunderstood." Not because greatness requires confusion, but because originality often appears as madness to the uninitiated. This doesn't mean every misunderstood person is a genius, but it does mean that rejection is not always a sign of failure. Sometimes it's evidence of integrity, of having stayed true to one's inner compass despite external pressure. And this is the ultimate strength of the deep thinker. They do not betray their own vision, even if it costs them belonging, even if it means standing alone. So where does this leave us? We must begin to imagine a new form of community, one that honors solitude without isolating the solitary, one that values the slow, strange, and thoughtful voices amidst the roar of constant chatter. This requires a cultural shift, from consumption to contemplation, from distraction to depth. It means creating space in our schools, our conversations, our technologies, for the kind of thinking that doesn't fit in a soundbite. The age of the misunderstood thinker need not end in tragedy. We are more connected than ever. It is possible now to find one's tribe, not by geography, but by spirit. In this way, the deep thinker does not disappear. They find one another, across distance, across time, across silence. And in doing so, they reshape the world, not through conquest, but through quiet revolution. We are living in the most connected age in human history, yet rarely has thought felt so shallow, so rushed, so reactive. In a single minute, millions of posts are shared, billions of videos are watched, and an avalanche of commentary floods the collective mind. In this whirlwind, where is there room for reflection? Where is there space for doubt, for complexity, for nuance? Deep thinkers suffer in this environment, not because they cannot keep up, but because they refuse to trade insight for immediacy. They are not wired for virality. They are designed for depth. In a culture of immediacy, slowness becomes a kind of rebellion. Silence becomes subversive. Reflection becomes revolutionary. Wisdom is slow. It does not emerge in real-time streams or trending algorithms. It brews over years, steeped in solitude, dialogue, study, and experience. The philosopher's path is not compatible with multitasking. The mystic's insights do not arrive on demand. Yet our systems reward speed, fast opinions, fast answers, fast judgment. The slow thinker becomes a misfit, not because their ideas are wrong, but because they take too long to say them. The tragedy is not just personal, it's civilizational. When we marginalize the deep thinker, we impoverish ourselves. We lose the wisdom that guards us from repeating history. We lose the imagination that reinvents our future. What then can be done? We must carve out sanctuaries in this age of distraction, places both internal and external, where thinking is not rushed, where solitude is not shameful, and where truth is not sacrificed to trend. These can be physical, a quiet room, a park bench, a personal study, or digital, curated communities, long-form discussions, spaces where silence is permitted and depth encouraged. We must protect these spaces fiercely, not because they are nostalgic, but because they are necessary. Without sanctuaries, deep thought becomes an endangered species, and without deep thought, we become shallow imitations of ourselves. To survive and thrive in today's world, deep thinkers must develop tools, inner technologies to navigate outer chaos. Here are a few. Radical journaling, writing not just to record, but to understand, to argue with yourself, to deepen rather than perform. Scheduled solitude, regular time blocks free from input, no phone, no news, just space to think. Idea incubation, letting thoughts mature over time, not forcing conclusions, but allowing insights to surface organically. Kindred connection, finding others on the path, not many, but a few who understand silence, value slowness, and speak the language of depth. Resilient detachment, the ability to remain inwardly rooted while outwardly misunderstood. These are not luxuries, they are lifelines. Isolation need not be permanent. For many deep thinkers, the journey begins in loneliness, but it does not end there. Eventually, the work done in the shadows finds its way to light. The insights earned in exile find their audience. The inner clarity becomes outward guidance. This is the final transformation, not escape from the world, but return to it. Transformed, resilient, whole. The task is not to remain apart forever. The task is to return with medicine, to walk back into the noise with silence intact, to engage the world without losing one's soul, to think deeply in a world that forgets how. Let this be a call to those who feel out of place. Do not shrink to fit the culture. Expand to match your calling. If your mind is wired for depth, do not apologize for it. Do not mask it in small talk or bury it beneath banality. The world may not celebrate you, but it needs you. You are the bridge between epochs, the conscience of the collective, the soul whispering beneath the static. You are not behind your time. You are ahead of it. And when the future finally arrives, it will come wearing your ideas. History does not remember the average opinion. It remembers the brave insight, the lone voice, the rejected vision. Every age mocks its prophets and builds monuments to them later. If you are laughed at now, wait. If you are dismissed, endure. If you are alone, keep going. Because your solitude is not empty, it is fertile, and from it will grow something the world has not yet imagined. To the thinkers, the feelers, the questioners, the wanderers, you are not broken. You are not too much. You are simply deep in a world that fears depth. But hold your ground. Your voice matters. Your vision matters. Your silence is sacred. And though the world may never fully understand you, it will someday thank you. Because while others chase the moment, you are building eternity. Now tell me in the comment, who are you when you allow silence to speak louder than your accommodating smile? If this message made sense, write in the comments, I choose silence. Let's see how many here are ready for this transition, and don't forget, keep watching the next video.